So it's been a little bit. In the span of a little bit over a year, I had a lot going on. A lot of ups and a lot of downs, but that's life, I suppose, and it got me thinking of something. Ever since I was a little kid, I've always loved Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. The characters, the look, the environments, the narration. I won't give a whole history lesson, as fascinating as that would be, since I'm sure most of you have at least heard of it in one way or another. For the most part, the series is actually grounded in reality, but the major difference is that the trains and most vehicles have a face and can communicate directly with people. There's actually a whole cast of characters, but we're going to be focusing on one in particular, Henry the Green Engine.
Henry the Green Engine has lived on the island of Sodor for many years. He wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Henry is a bit of an enigma, since you can't directly call him one singular adjective like the others. He's a big engine who primarily pulls freight cars, though not exclusively, but he primarily carries heavy loads on the railway. He can be rude and snobbish, famously being part of a clique with the arrogant Gordon and the vain James. There's also an insecure side to him as well, but we'll put a pin in that.
Oh dear, puffed Henry.
However, of the three, he tends to be the most humble, highlighted by the episode I've been revisiting a lot more as an adult, Henry's Forest.
But there is one place that Henry always enjoyed visiting more than any other. His driver knew this, too. "Come on, Henry," he would sometimes say. "We've made good time today. We'll stop for a while by the forest."
This was the 9th episode of the 3rd season of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. In the episode, we learn when he's not working, Henry likes to take his time away to spend time in a forest. There's a section of track that allows him and his crew to enjoy the quiet sounds of nature, as opposed to what a railway usually is.
Henry always felt better for being here. He couldn't really explain why, but his driver understood. "It's peaceful," he said to Henry.
However, one night, a vicious storm comes through the island. The other engines are fine with it, but Henry worries about the forest.
"I hope the wind won't harm the forest."
Next day, we see that a large chunk of the forest has been ripped out. Henry is part of a crew to clean it up.
Henry felt sad. "What will happen to all the animals who live here?" he thought. When Henry's flat cars were full of logs, he took them to the timber mill where they would be turned into furniture and other things. Henry was glad the wood was being put to good use, but he was still sorry to lose part of his forest.
By the end of the episode, however, Sir Topham Hatt has begun an effort to repair that part of the forest.
When Henry returned, he was most surprised. There were Terence and Trevor busily helping the workmen clear the torn stumps and branches.
The ending shot showing Henry happy again in the forest.
Now, whenever Henry stops by the forest, he can see the new trees growing strong and tall. Sometimes everywhere is very quiet, and at other times Henry can hear leaves rustling or a bird's wing brushing the air. Often he can hear the distant sound of children laughing, and always he is happy here.
So I first saw this episode on a VHS tape called Trust Thomas. It was actually how a lot of Thomas fans first saw the show in the 90s. This was definitely a nice episode, but it didn't resonate with me as a kid considering the other exciting or funny episodes on the tape. Of course, I'd re-watch it and the entirety of the series as I got older. Henry's Forest, though, started creeping into my mind more as an adult. That feeling of trying to find calm in the chaos of your life, which is especially important for a character like Henry.
"I want a scarf." "Rubbish, Percy," said Henry. "Engines don't wear scarves." "Engines with proper funnels do," replied Percy. "You've only got a small one."
Do you remember how I said Henry has an exposed side to him and how he has insecurities? In Season 1, Henry had a story arc where he was constantly sick. He couldn't get the steam properly or function right. He had workmen working on him to make him feel better, but nothing was going right. There were even points where engines viciously mocked him over it.
"Oh dear, my system is out of order. No one understands my case. You don't know what I suffer," moaned Henry.
"Rubbish," said Thomas. "You're too slow. You need exercise."
"I suffer dreadfully, and no one cares." "Rubbish, Henry," snorted James. "You don't work hard enough."
So he was essentially left alone in his suffering in a loud, uncaring world. Eventually he did get a temporary solution with special Welsh coal that gave him the energy he needed. However, after a massive crash, it was decided to send him to a special workshop to give his body a massive rebuild.
Cheer up, Henry. It wasn't your fault. Ice and snow caused the accident. I'm sending you to Crewe, a fine place for sick engines. They'll give you a new shape and a larger firebox. You'll feel a different engine and won't need special coal anymore. Won't that be nice? Yes, sir, said Henry doubtfully.
Now, this didn't remove his snobbiness and anger. If anything, I think being sick so often and having to deal with the mockery jaded him to an extent.
Pah! You're late. That smell is making me ill.
It's the fish, replied Thomas, and there's danger on the rails. That's why we're late.
Ha! You're the only danger on the rails, Thomas.
This is why seeing him go to a special quiet area is so fascinating. His one true retreat away from the other engines and work. A place where he doesn't need to defend himself. A place where he can be himself and enjoy his health from those who won't judge him. However, the main theme that always brings me back to this episode is the theme of change. One minute you can be fine, going about your work and routines, then the next minute it's ripped away from you. You did everything you were supposed to do, and yet now you're left to suddenly and harshly readjust your entire life. Henry has to go through the same process here. An act of God has come through and destroyed a chunk of Henry's special plays. It's not all gone, of course, but for Henry, it's a massive instability in a life that has literal crashes in it.
Henry braked hard, but the freight cars hit some of the rubble and plunged into the ravine.
That his safe spot has been tampered with, his one retreat that he has. I think everyone can relate to that.
Oh dear, sighed Toby to Thomas. I wish there was something we could do to make things better again. Yes, indeed, replied Thomas. But what? We can't mend broken trees.
But the end of the episode poses this statement from Terence the tractor.
Look, Henry, called Terence. We're beginning again. The hillside will look better than ever before. You'll see.
Things get better. It may not be exactly the same, but things can get better. In life, I've found that everyone has a tendency to expect the worst. Lord knows I do. You prepare for the worst to happen so that you can be ready, so that you don't get hurt. It's like when you flinch when someone prepares to punch you. Yet Henry's Forest teaches us that, yes, things will be different and not back to where they were before, but you'll be okay. That you'll find the stability again in your life and find peace. It's an episode that honestly gives me a tear in my eye, especially in the last scene.
Now, whenever Henry stops by the forest, he can see the new trees growing strong and tall. Sometimes everywhere is very quiet, and at other times Henry can hear leaves rustling or a bird's wing brushing the air. Often he can hear the distant sound of children laughing, and always he is happy here.
Season 3 had some really resonant moments, but I think this one is the one that sticks out to me the most. Honestly, I think everyone has those places that they need to retreat to get away from expectations of the world around you. That one part that knows that you can go there when you need to. I suppose Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends is that for me, to an extent. Of course, you need to deal with the changes, but sometimes you can retreat and just enjoy what brings you comfort.
Don't you